Yeah, good to go.
All right. Well, I'll kick off then. So, Maria, thank you very much for having us on here today, and to Paxate as well. We're very excited to present to our target group of MSPs. Some of your customers are already customers of ours, and we're really enjoying working with the MSP group as a whole. And some of the things we're uncovering is really quite interesting. And so, what we're trying to do is by sharing some of the stories and some of the learnings, we're really trying to lift all boats with the way that we're educating around insurance at the moment. We really want this to be participative. So please put your hand up, say something in the chat, and if there's anything that you'd like us to explain more or go a little bit deeper, we'd love to have your comments as we progress throughout the webinar. So with that, we'll just get into the legal stuff. This is obviously general advice only. Andy and I are both insurance brokers, and our job is to, really work as middlemen for the insurance industry and find the best the best policies for our clients. But part of that is also making sure that their policies are correct and will respond if there's ever a claim. So a lot of the work we're doing is trying to help I suppose, explain a lot of areas. And in the past, the biggest complaint from our clients is my previous broker never told me that. And so, it actually makes our life easier if we tell you all of this before we come to renewal time. So, so a little bit about us. So, Andy, where'd you come from?
Good question. Good question. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Andrew Bremner. I'm actually an accidental insurance broker. Was never thought about too seriously at school or university. But prior to insurance broking, I spent 8 years with IBM, basically doing strategy and then large-scale implementation into insurance companies and other finance companies, finance businesses and banks. And also I had 2 years at Gartner providing consulting. So about 8 years ago, we started Sherpa Insurance, which looks after generally professional services, but also a lot of other industries. And we found that our fastest growing segment was MSPs. And so we decided they needed care and knowledge that was very much specific to them. So we started SherpaTech, the insurance specialist for tech and IT, about 1.5 years ago. So that's enough about me. Thanks.
Yeah. So my background has been in scaling businesses and business management. I grew a construction business where we did a lot of risk management. And through that, I had a love of technology. So, we invested heavily in a lot of the services that MSPs offer now. And then I went on to work for another business as a CTO that does lights, lasers, and entertainment. And that was an amazing journey. But again, it was all based around management of risk. And so when I started talking to Andy a little while ago about insurance, it was something I'd never considered. But how we manage risk, and insurance is just one mitigator, is really how I sort of come into play here as well. So it's a great space to be. I never thought I'd be so excited by insurance. So MSPs are risky business. Maria, I suppose you've probably seen a bit of a change in the nature of business activities that MSPs do over the last sort of 5 or 10 years. How do you think that their business activities have changed in that time?
Oh, drastically. I mean, MSP wasn't really a widely used term 10 years ago, if at all. 10 years ago, it was IT providers selling hardware, selling break fix. The managed services concept has come around in the last sort of 10 years. And so that contract and that managing end-to-end clients' IT needs is still new.
Yeah, and we see that. I mean, the underwriters actually are constantly changing the activities that they're asking around ICT providers, and they're looking for different activities now to classify that risk around. And Also, the connected nature of the services they're doing now. There's so much more pass through. There's so many more little nuanced areas, and so the way that they manage risk, they're not just a guy in their basement anymore. They're connected everywhere and they're exposed in a lot of places. So, while we like to have a little bit of fun in what we do, it actually is really serious business how, an industry like MSPs actually manage their risk. So that's where we start.
And just to add to that, the reliance by MSP's customers on the MSP to provide them advice and keeping the lights on has just grown enormously. And so there's enormous pressure on MSPs to protect their customer base.
Okay. So Andy, this is really about, what comes before insurance. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're all surrounded by risks. We've, in the MSP space, we've got cyber risk. We've got chances of getting something wrong for our customers and customers losing money and making a claim against us. There's changing regulation all the time that could trip us up. There's staff shortages and skills shortages because of the growth in the industry as a whole and the dependence on technology. It's never ending, and you guys live and breathe this space all the time. So where we look to here, how do we mitigate these risks? And we start with three things. What we call our first line of defense: people, process, and technology. And those are the three things are probably the most important thing. It's no different for Tim and I and our business. Starting with technology, what is the right technology stack to protect you and mitigate you from the risks that are out there?
Sorry, Andy, just to jump in there, the tech stack as well, that's something the underwriters have a lot more awareness around now. So it's something that, they're getting much more knowledgeable on. Everyone always complains about insurance contracts saying, why do they ask so many stupid questions? But they're trying to get to the nub of what the tech stack is and what the areas of people, process, and technology are. And everyone's investing heavily there as well. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And actually what we're seeing as well is the insurers are taking a closer look and actually identifying bits of technology that actually reduce your risk and make your risk a better risk than perhaps the next MSP. So that's something to keep in mind. The other big thing is sorry, do you want to add?
No, you go.
Yeah. So is process. What controls do you have in place? What documented processes that people follow? How are you training your people to do the right processes? How they understood in terms of those processes linking to your customer and where the handoffs are. And again, that's a really critical thing that we're going to probably dive into a bit more detail shortly. Is have those processes. And the last but absolutely not least is people. So the people choose the processes and choose to maintain those processes. The people choose the technology and choose to run that technology properly. The people are probably the most important component to this, and often sadly it's a bit of a source of risk and claim is through the people side.
And we're seeing underwriters now mandate education of those people. So one of the big areas that, cyber insists on is the people training and proof of that as well. We'll touch on it a little bit later, but proof is really important. So, when you invest in all these areas, you've almost got to think like what's going to happen when these things are examined, and you need to be able to prove everything. So, we'll touch on that a bit later as well. So, but yeah, then after people and process technology, you have we have now insurance, and there's different types and classes of insurance, or your own funds. Many people choose to self-insure. Contractually, you're usually required to hold certain types and certain levels of insurance. And I mean, Andy, we're seeing that now increase in some areas, aren't we?
Absolutely. So the insurance. The second line of defense only happens if a risk breaks through that first line. And we are seeing different things going on. So one of the things we'll talk about later, but it's getting that insurance right, so that your insurance policy that you've purchased, actually stands up in the case of a claim. And then secondly, if you don't have the insurance, or the insurance doesn't respond, then basically it's going to be your funds or your balance sheet that will end up funding the claim coming through.
So I suppose following that, Andy, so what are the nature of the claims we're now starting to see come through?
Yeah, so let's move on to that. So what we've done is we've secured 3 cyber-related claims. They're not cyber insurance claims necessarily, they're cyber-related claims. And these have been sourced from Watton Kearney, the law firm. So, and before we go through this, we just need to discuss an overlap between professional indemnity, which you probably are aware of and you probably carry as an MSP, and that's protection for bad advice. So if that causes loss. So if you if you cause a gap in your customer's security, you left a door open, cyber bad guys come through and cause damage that caused your customer lose money, and your customer makes a claim against you, your insurance protection is professional indemnity. And now PI is a very old insurance. It's been around for hundreds of years. Doctors have it, architects have it, medical people have it, accountants have it, lawyers have it, but also MSPs are required to have it and should have it. So PI is a very old, established, well-tested insurance. This is very, very different to cyber insurance. And cyber insurance is more like a pimply teenager. It's only been around, say, 15 years, doesn't really know what it's doing.
Stays up late.
Stays up late, gets up late, and you don't know what you're going to get day by day. And that's a bit like cyber insurance. And
there's lots of variation as well, because different underwriters provide different cover and different wordings and different, so we don't see the same consistencies of shopping like for like policies. They're all need to be assessed on their own merits. And I think we'll see that change as well over the next sort of 12 to 18 months, where governments are asking people now to hold cyber, but they're not specifying the areas that they're asking people to hold it. So, as knowledge raises in this area, we're seeing it as well with the New South Wales ICT government buy contract, where they're asking people to hold $20 million in cyber coverage for work they're doing. And in some instances, the level of work they're doing doesn't even come close to that liability. So, Maria, are you finding that you're hearing from the MSPs that their insurance requirements are unachievable in some instances?
I haven't heard about minimum coverage requirements at this point. That's not something that anyone's mentioned. What I have heard is that the premiums and the asks around the premiums have been unreachable at this point. Not necessarily the dollars. Some of the requirements around technology, the stack. I hadn't actually heard when you mentioned education of your staff as a potential requirement. That's not something I've heard yet. So I expect we'll hear a lot of it over the next year in Australia.
Yeah, no, we're definitely seeing underwriters ask for that, and actually to have that proof in place. I mean, we do it with a training organisation that runs, little webinars that we watch around, business email compromise and other kind of, and there's a number of vendors that provide that material. But I mean, I can speak firsthand to how valuable it is, because it's, it's put it front of mind for me in many instances, and then you pick things up. So, that's I suppose the people side.
And just back to Maria. Excuse me, back to Maria. Those cyber hygiene. So the staff education, together with making sure everything's patched properly, you're up to date on all your patches, plus MFA are sort of 3 basic cyber hygiene requirements by insurers across the board now. Yeah. And to that point, the sands are really shifting, and because this new pimply teenager cyber insurance is morphing all the time, we're seeing the claims being tested are also changing, and the regulatory landscape that, if we've got time, we'll touch on, is also moving. So it's really you need, and we'll talk to this a bit further, but you really need your insurance broker to help you navigate through this world.
And challenge your broker on it as well. Some of the things we talk about later, bubble them to the front and ask them these questions. We're happy to share the slides, Maria, after this as well, if anyone wants any takeaways. So
yeah. And now, sorry, this slide's been up for a while, but basically the supply chain attacks that you probably will have heard of. Kaseya is a very recent one, 2021, and that supply chain went through MSPs into their customer base and caused all sorts of drama. And then ransomware and business email compromise attacks continue to be enormous. Ransomware has been the number1 weapon of the cyber bad guys for 2 or 3 years now. And then just on
that one, Andy, I suppose business email compromise is a term that the underwriters used to class it as, just social engineering. And so, now we're seeing underwriters, as they go through these claims and they break out specific examples, they start to ring fence them and then put sublimits on it. So you can only claim for a certain amount in that claim up for that area. So you might have a policy that covers cyber for $1 million, but they'll sublimit the business email compromise. So if you're using it as a risk mitigator, you want to understand how much you're actually covered for in that instance, because it's quite often not the top line number. And we're going to see more and more of these smaller nuanced areas bubble to the top of these policies. So year on year, you want to make sure you're aware of what they are. Sorry, Andy.
Yeah, great. No, I think that's good. And then in the final one, direct attacks. Righto, moving on. So what? I suppose this is really something to consider. It's really about what does good cyber insurance cover, and we have a view, and it's and just reinforcing that every insurer has a different type of cyber insurance and covers very different things, and also their definitions about what is covered, what specific things are covered, and what are not are quite different, and it needs a bit of navigation. So what we've done is we've put this slide together saying, what do we consider is a good cyber insurance cover? And the starting position is the incident response. They need that 24/7 hotline for incident response, and probably like unlike most other insurances, the insurer wants to get involved really early. So the moment there's an incident, they want to jump in. And why do they want to jump in? They want to reduce their potential outlay in the long run. So they want to be involved with understanding the forensic of what's gone wrong, understanding what communications need to go out there, understanding what interactions with the regulator, if it's a data breach, must be had, understanding what negotiations and helping with the negotiations with any fines that flow through. So that incident response is really critical.
Yeah, and we also see, Andy, it's just for everyone's clarification, it's about protecting the person who holds that insurance. So cyber insurance is for the entity that holds it. So that's why we encourage people to hold it for the MSP themselves, and them to encourage their client to hold it as well. Where we talk about third-party coverage, it's actually only third-party defense coverage. So it's coverage for the defense costs against someone suing you. It's not coverage for remediating with a third party. And that's a little bit of a nuance, but it's something that, it took me a while initially to sort of start to follow.
Yeah, and and in terms of these three boxes that we've got down below, the first party, third party, crime and social engineering, just to expand a bit on that first party and just to really reinforce the point from Tim is really these policies are first party policies. They are there to protect your organization. So they're not there to necessarily protect your customer. So we often get that question, oh, well, does, from an MSP, does our cyber insurance cover our customer? Well, not really. It does, and we'll go into that in a bit more detail now. But for the most part, it's there just to protect you. So what does it cover? It covers first party, cyber event response costs, forensics, virus extraction, customer notification, PR, losses to your business like loss of profits, business impact. Those sorts of things. You can choose to have contingent business interruption as well, which is whereby if you can't operate, you've still got to pay your rent, you've still got to pay your staff, you've still got to keep your lights on, those sorts of things. And there are optional covers to include that also within the first party.
Yeah. Okay. No, I think that sounds great, Andy. Thanks.
And then on the third party, as mentioned, it's really there to protect you for the legal costs of defending third party claims. That's what it's there for.
Yeah, and the biggest example of that is probably people getting swept up in claims. So in something like a Kaseya attack, the end customer is possibly going to go after the MSP. Then the MSP needs to, reconcile with the vendors. The insurer is the best partner to have in that because, the legal costs and, any junior barrister will sweep up as many people as possible that touch the claim. And that's what we're seeing in these claim examples that are to come as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, great. And then that last box around the crime and social engineering. So the social engineer is business email compromise. So this is these are cyber crimes. So people going in, breaking into bank accounts and the like. And social engineering is the pretending to be someone else. And we've seen 3 claims with our customers averaging over $200,000 each on very much the social engineering crime segment. So it's a real concern, and it's normally an optional extra in your cyber insurance. Okay, well now that we've got a handle on what cyber insurance is, and again, feel free to ask something on the chat if need be, and we're happy to answer it as we go. Okay, so this is our first cyber incident claim example, and again we see this issue. What's actually happened is a customer was hit by a ransomware attack and blames their MSP. So it might be a situation that could happen to you. Absolutely could happen to you. And by the way, we see this across all industries, not just the MSP space. So that's just the heads up. They do draw, these sorts of claims do tend to draw a lot of people in, and often they take a lot of time to clean up. And in the 3 cases that we're going to run through, all 3 are still ongoing.
And the underwriters are learning from them as well, because I suppose, Andy, can you speak a little bit to what would happen after the claim is lodged? So do the underwriters then just pay out and do nothing, or?
Yeah, not necessarily. Not necessarily, but and this is where you need help from your broker, your general insurance broker, to help frame the claim properly so that you have the best chance to succeed. So this I can't underplay how important this is. So in terms of that, what the insurer will do will make sure that the claim is underneath the policy, so it's within the policy. And so again, there's some nuancing that may be needed to frame the claim properly. In this case, you might think, oh, well, it's a cyber-related claim. It'll go against your cyber insurance. But in this particular case, the claim by the client for 400,000 for the MSP saying that, hey, we've lost money, we've lost revenue and increased costs as a result of the ransomware attack. The MSP's defense is actually professional indemnity. So it's a bit of a gray area between PI, professional indemnity, and cyber. and really the result of this is you kind of need both to fill in the gaps.
Because in this case, the MSP is not being blamed for the ransomware attack, are they? The MSP is actually being blamed for the process that existed after trying to remediate it, because their backups had failed. So, yeah, it's an interesting distinction there.
It is, and I think one of the things, and we'll get onto the lessons learned in a moment, but the big thing, the MSP, sorry, the customer did blame the MSP for the attack, and we'll and there's a bit of a toing and froing here, but
this is pretty typical, I think, of what we've heard from other people. Maria, are you seeing many sort of instances of MSPs getting caught in scenarios like this?
Yeah, and the problem is that it comes down to perhaps a process. As you mentioned, sometimes the process of, have you checked your backups? What happened when you were trying to remediate after a ransomware attack? It more often than not comes down to the processes. So yeah, it makes sense that the claim would be on PI insurance, because that's around their business processes.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we're talking about to help protect people with PI, and this is where it gets into the contract side as well. So, it'll be great to touch on this with Anne next time as well. But it's all about good evidence and good proof and good documentation. Andy and I talk about like what's in scope, what's out of scope, and actually, all those conversations usually happen between an MSP and a customer, and that was the exact example here. But there was no evidence, and that's where then things started to fall apart. So, as brokers, we keep very detailed meeting notes, because if we don't, and then it unravels, our PI is at risk. And I think that's an area that, coming from construction, we are so documented and diligent there. But as MSPs have grown into this space of consultancy, that documentation sometimes is a little bit rushed. And so while it's not an insurance problem, it's something that they can improve to, really protect themselves there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me move on to the next slide. And absolutely. It was around that, the issues exposed around that poor documentation. And one of our customers, we were just speaking to this week, they're dealing with 500 tickets a week, and some of those, are not documented properly. And so the battle is how do they make sure that if there's a change in documentation or a change in agreement on the handoffs, in this case, what needed to do in terms of backup process, how do they make sure this is documented to protect themselves in the case of a blow up? And it flows through also into your contractuals, but so it's kind of two levels here. But that was really exposed.
Sorry, Andy, do you think that the insurance companies understand, the underwriters understand that if I'm an MSP and I've got a great PSA system and my documentation is 100%, will that positively impact premiums? Do they understand how that operates?
Yeah, so they probably short answer, no.
Okay.
But the longer answer is they know where the claims are coming from, and then they're able to, and they'll take a view. It's coming from here, here, and here, and it may be around procedures. It may be something around your procedures. It may be something around your contracts. So they will start zooming in. So often insurers are now asking for, show us your terms of trade, your terms to your customers, so that they can look through and see what gaps there could be from an insurance point of view.
Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
hold harmless clauses and more. Yeah.
And that's where, Maria, you touched on a really good point there about, those really good PSA systems. We like to put that up front. We like to tell insurers about that. Too many people just answer the questions they're asked and think that puts their best posture forward. If you've got ISO, if you've got NIST, if you're aligned in other areas, build a document that actually says, this is why I'm a good risk, and share that with your broker to make sure that they get that picture. And we'll touch on a few other tips and tricks when we get to that sort of framework a little bit later. But it's you've got to sell yourself, and there are some really great MSPs out there doing some awesome processes and procedures, but you've got to share that with the people that are actually trying to underwrite the risk. So yeah,
that's a good point. Now, one of the other things, so I'm jumping here, but one of the other things that came out of this case is unfair contract terms. So what does this mean? And really, just the health warning here: we're not an insurance. We're not a law firm. We're insurance brokers. So you may need to seek legal advice. We've taken this slide directly from Watton & Kearney, the law firm. And again, I think we can swing back to Anne with IT Agree on this particular area, and she can provide some colour. What happened in this particular case is and actually, sorry, before that, what we hear often from customers is, well, we've restricted our liability contractually, so we've made it so tight in our contract. We don't care what happens down the track, because they can sue us, but we can hold up the contract because we're saying we're not responsible for this, this, and this. However, I don't think that's quite the case. Certainly, we're not seeing that from this case. And in Australia, we have this unfair contract terms in Australian consumer law, and it applies to contracts entered into by consumers and small business that employ less than 20 people, and the contract value is 300K in a single year, or $1 million if it runs for longer. And what it is, it's kind of the opposite of buyer beware, that caveat emptor that you probably heard of when you're at school, and it's probably the opposite there. It's really protecting the battler and the small business. And what are the key elements? The key elements are imbalance in rights and obligations. Is it protecting the interests of the customer, and would it cause harm? So and then one of the big things that they talk about is this transparency. And again, you'll need legal opinion for this. This is not our space, but this is something that came through strongly in this particular case.
In this particular case, they tried to limit their liability to the value of the contract. So the small value of the contract, and then they said, well, it's only 30 grand's worth of work, so therefore we can't go over that. And that's not really, and it was very, very wordy, but that was the nub of it. And so their liability can clearly go further than that for the damage that they can cause to a customer. So
and in addition, sorry, Tim. In addition, they had things like, we will not, if there's a data breach, we're not responsible. There was a whole lot of things that they said that they wouldn't be responsible for. So so just I think that's just something to be wary of.
And that's the importance of a contract. That's the importance of the contract as well. And we are seeing, as Andy said, the underwriters now, when we say that somebody's holding a contract for a couple of $100 grand and they're operating under the MSP's contract, they request a copy of it every time. So they're getting much more knowledgeable there. Yeah,
that's great. Now, to close out this particular case, there's I think we've touched on the document responsibilities. Really, really, really important. And watch out for that limitation of liability clause that you might have in your contract. and something that we just need to we've actually started to make a bit of a big thing about it, but to our MSP customers, is really encourage your customers to carry cyber insurance, because it's actually going to protect you as the MSP. And we've spoken to many different groups about this and the benefits, because often the skills to do the cleanup, it's great to have the extra business as an MSP to clean up sort of a data breach for your customer, but there's a whole range of skills that you possibly don't have in terms of communications, in terms of negotiations with regulators, in terms of dealing with specific claim issues that have come from left field. It's probably not the MSP space. So it's
I mean, especially in that area, Andy, MSPs are the trusted advisor when it comes to technology, but they get drawn into that people and process as well. And so because they're drawn into those three, it's their PI if they don't sort of touch on those areas. So an easy way to tick that off is if they've told their customer to hold the cyber, then they've given the advice that they should have all these other areas covered. And then in the event of a breach, it's like, well, that's why we told you this. We're seeing some actually contractually put that in there now. So it kind of then protects them, or does protect them in that instance as a PI claim. So
yeah. Absolutely. And there's probably an opportunity for you as MSPs to include in your contracts, hey, we strongly recommend, or you should have a cyber policy, and
also know how it's intended to respond. Because as we spoke about all those different types of cyber insurance policies, some will outsource their hotline, some will carry it, internally. Some will have the response team, by a third party. Some will actually, engage the lawyers before they go there. But you really want to sort of explore that before you get to that incident. So you've gone through the incident response plan and you know what the expectation is there as well for the different entities. Because that comes back to how an MSP can manage these incidents better, because the better job you do, the less money you're going to have to pay on premiums if they rise, because you'll be under a claim environment.
Absolutely. Now, what we want to do now is jump into a little bit of education about what makes an insurance contract. So there are three elements to this, and it's actually pretty, this sort of bare bones how insurance works is pretty important, because it has implications.
This is the stuff that gets Andy and I really excited. This is where the rubber hits the road, proposals and schedules and wordings.
We live in this space.
Yeah.
Okay, so and we Tim and I have reviewed literally hundreds of proposals. So the first part, and we'll get into more detail, but and seen sort of glaring errors that we know, in the case of a claim, there's a very good chance that the policy won't be worth the paper it's written on. So it's a real concern. Anyway, so there's three main components. There's the proposal. This is and insurance is based on mutual honesty. So I'm honest about what I say my risk is. The insurer is honest about what they say in the case of an incident or a claim, what they will cover. So that's the premise. So in the proposal, what it means is you need to explain your risk so that in an honest way, so the insurer can understand. This is one of the things we see is business activities are often inaccurate, and we've got new clients on board that have seen that and seen that claim example and been accused of, hey, you didn't tell us about this, therefore we may not pay out. And then the second part to this is the website alignment. So if you say you're in your proposal that you're an MSP, and then in your website you say, hey, actually we offer a whole bunch of MSSP, security type activities, then that's a red flag. So there must be alignment.
And when do people figure these things out? Usually, Andy.
Yeah, the trouble is they finish. This blows up when there's a claim. Yeah, and it's too late. It's too late. So we are quite involved in making sure that business activity and that website alignment is done, and we do it as much as to protect you guys as to protect us as well. So,
and I think that's something we see MSPs really frustrated with having to answer all these questions every year. It comes around really, really fast, and we've seen other brokers to help out their clients just reuse the insurance proposals. So they send them through the last couple of years. They say, is it the same? Yes, it's the same. And they lodge off that. But what you're missing there is the industry sees activities change. And so we saw one, with QBE where they had cloud as just one big bucket. And that was from 5 years ago. And now they see that as like very nuanced and divided up into a bunch of little subcategories. But if they're operating off your 5 year ago proposal and then you have a claim and they look at it and they say, but that's not actually what the activities are you're doing, or that's not how your risk is now perceived, it then means that one of these three things on the screen falls apart and the other two are worthless. So therefore the insurance contract doesn't exist. And it sounds a bit dire, but they're the little nuances that we're trying to, I suppose, help people, just be aware of. So, apples aren't always apples.
Yeah, agreed. And the other two components, the schedule, you're probably aware of it. That's sort of the summary of your specific cover provided by the insurer. So the cover level, the endorsements, the excesses, the dates, the sublimits, all those things. That's your schedule. And then the final component is the wording. So the wording is the deep detail, and this has got all the definitions, if this happens, that happens, the specific activities that need to happen in the case of a claim, what's covered, what's not covered, the nuances. It gets very legal very quickly, but it's an integral part to your insurance contract.
Yeah, that's the wordings are something that I think are really important because each insurer provides their own wording. So it's the rules for the game. So if you really want to understand how they're approaching it, you can sort of delve into those different areas. But that's also the job of a good broker to make sure that you're getting things put in front of you that aren't just the cheapest policy. If you're getting 3 or 4 different quotes, don't just think that they're all the same. They will all have different nuances, and sort of highlighting that to your broker to say, can you tell me what's different about these three quotes here? So it's just not always jumping to the cheapest. On my car insurance, I jump to the cheapest because they're all the same. They're all consistent for that one type of car. With your business, it's totally different. So yeah, just a nuance.
Right, that moves us on to Cyberclaim 2. And thank you, Tim, for the little buddy bandage man.
This makes me laugh because, look, the reality is people are unlucky. Just sometimes it's not their fault. Yeah. We've seen some of the most qualified and successful people still come undone in professional indemnity and public liability claims across industries. Not just in MSP land. And the complexities that are introduced with MSPs. It's cute.
Absolutely, it is cute. Yeah, absolutely. So it's when that people, process, and technology first wall of defense breaks down. And something gets through. Okay, so in this case, the MSP suffered a ransomware attack. Very sad. So it feels more like the cyber insurance type issue rather than professional indemnity.
Yeah.
The impact to the customers, the customers wasn't a flow-on ransomware situation to the customers, but the customers were damaged because they could no longer use the MSP services. The MSP was closed down, and they were concerned that confidential information had been removed. So the customer, the unfortunate thing is they actually had 2 out of their 50 customers making a claim against them for lack of services, and that possibly would be a professional indemnity claim, but there needs some working through. But the MSP did an incredible job of really mitigating sort of post breach, post ransomware attack of the vast majority of customer claims by, you know, offering them discounts due to the outage, resolving the question on whether data was impacted or not, offering assistance to impacted customers, providing guidance of data breach assessment. I think they did 7 things. Offering a review of the impacted data on behalf of the clients, preparing draft notifications on behalf of the clients.
And they did this in partnership with the insurer as well. So the insurers, you know, their partner to deliver these specialist services as they're going through this. So yeah, that was it becomes a partnership at this point. You know, you're holding insurance to access these specialists. If you could go out and book them tomorrow, they're not available. But if you hold the insurance, it gives you a direct line to those communications and response teams that now they're heavily invested in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry for reading out those points, but they're basically 7 cracking points. And you know, the MSP, did a cracking job. Yes, they were guided, but yeah, they did a cracking job of doing that. So the issues were basically the MSP unable to provide contractual services, and 2 of their customers made a claim for breach of contract and negligence, and that normally would be covered under their professional indemnity policy.
I was actually, I was at the Watt and Kearney talk, Andy, when they were talking about this one. And, you know, I think they explained that the 2 clients were actually forced to make the claim because of their board direction. So it's one of those things where, you know, you might have great relationships with your counterparts on the other side of, you know, the relationship, but sometimes it's not always up to them whether they come after you or not. So, you know, that's just a little bit of a takeaway that, you know, you're not always in control of those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the key learnings, most of them, you know, we've sort of touched on earlier. But again, I'll reinforce the one about all parties need to have cyber insurance. It's really quite a valuable cover to have at this time. Okay. Back to education.
How are we going for time, Maria? We've got, is it 10 minutes or?
Yep, we've got about 10 minutes to go. So we'll keep going. We'll do a bit of education, and then we might open the floor for some questions.
Yeah, we can skim through this if So
and then there's a whole lot of content that we've still got to go, so we could maybe do a part 2.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe. We'll do a bit of homework.
We'll do a part 2 in a couple of weeks, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. And look, we'd love any follow-up questions as well. That if, you know, anyone has any scenarios or situations or concerns, you know, we're more than happy to take them through Maria and, you know, address them at the next one with Anne.
Yeah, great. Okay, so we'll just touch on this one quite quickly. So here are questions you should be asking your insurance broker, and all of these could be gotchas for you in the case of a claim. So it's really sort of a big awareness piece, and maybe we just touch on a couple. So perhaps the ransomware endorsement, we're seeing this a lot. So we've got some insurers that are actually in their cyber insurance policy excluding ransomware upfront. So in the case of a ransomware claim, they will pay 0 donut.
I can see a look on Maria's face. That's news to her.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's at one extreme, and then probably a lesser extreme on the endorsement is either a sublimit. So maybe the maximum they'll go to is 100,000 or 50,000. And then also we're seeing more and more from Chubb as a big player in the space. They are putting in like a they call it a co-insurance, so a reinsurance endorsement on ransomware. It's basically sharing the love. So they might take 50% of the hit, and then you, as the insured, the MSP, you take 50%, or they change those proportions. So
And
that's
they're things that, you know, you probably need put up in front of an MSP, because, you know, in a big long legal document, they just don't bubble to the front. So, you know, asking those questions, we think is the really important side there. So, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I suppose the exclusions, they yeah, the clue is in the name, right? But what we're seeing a lot more of, and typically on the professional indemnity policy, you know, a few years ago, cyber was actually normally bundled in for an extra $200. That's the crazy thing. And now it's specifically excluded from almost all policies, apart from cyber, of course. So, but it's something, as the complexity rolls on, more and more exclusions around PI and cyber are kicking in for MSPs, for that tech and IT space. And you really need to sort of get your insurance broker to run through those, so you're clear about what they are, so that you can make other decisions. There may be other mitigations, like you know, contractual things or selection of customer, whole bunch of things that you could do to mitigate that, and not necessarily have as a, you know, given that the insurance mitigation is gone.
We saw one just yesterday that was an exclusion if a proper testing and sort of QA/QC testing handover process wasn't followed. So if you deliver a piece of software and it wasn't tested properly, or the customer hadn't signed to accept it, the policy did not cover it.
Yeah, it was the sign off. Yeah, customer sign off.
Yeah, it's a sign off.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
you know, if you know that exists in your insurance policy, you have to make sure that exists in your operational side as well. And they're the sort of things where these all become circular. And, you know, insurance is usually a reason to have these conversations with other parts of the business. But if you don't know about them, you can't have those conversations until it's too late.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'll just do one more, then Q&A. So the business activities, I know we've touched on it earlier, but we can't overstate how important really being accurate about your business activities is. So what we're seeing a lot of, because security services are becoming a bit on the nose with insurers right now, we're seeing the trend sort of ticking up in the last sort of 3-4 months. If yeah, and we think almost every MSP do some sort of security services type work, make sure that you include some activity in your proposal around MSSP or security services, rather than zero. Make sure you have something in there, even if it's just a small amount of activity that you do.
But it's probably a bit more simple than that in some instances as well, Andy. Like, if, you know, plumbing is not covered by an MSP policy, but there's all these other nuances that exist in there that if they don't actually, as now the MSP services are getting wider and wider, and they're doing more consultancy, they're doing more project management, all these other things, they need to actually include those in their proposals. So, you know, we used to see it was 50% hardware sales, 50% software, no, 40% software sales, then 10% management, you know, and that was kind of the mix 5 years ago. And now it's a much more spread risk. So you want to make sure you're covered for all those silos.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
Maria, do you want to stop for Q&A? Or should we?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm gonna open the floor for everyone to be able to have allowed microphones for everybody. So if anyone would like to speak up, they can unmute themselves. They can ask questions. We'll have 5 minutes or so of Q&A, and then I think we come back for a part 2, because you guys only got about halfway through your content. So
actually, we did stop at slide 19, but we've got some. So the 40 is deceptive.
Okay, that's fine. And I'm looking at it going, there's 40 slides there, and we're only up to 15. Does anyone have any questions for Andy or Tim?
And Maria, if not, we can jump into what's coming down the pipe.
I was going to say, Maria, some of those things that, obviously when we were speaking, Maria, I could read your facial expressions. They're probably a bit of a surprise.
There's a reason I don't play poker.
Did you think there's a lot, like some areas there that, we need to be able to share with a wider MSP community?
Yeah, definitely. There were a few things that I haven't heard of. And obviously, like you said, most of these things come to light when you go to make a claim.
Yeah.
Everything looks fine. Yeah, no problem. My insurance covers everything. And then you go to make a claim and then you go, oh, actually, it almost feels, this was a conversation I was having recently with an MSP, and it almost feels like we've done the wrong thing if we're talking about having to have made a claim. And people don't like to talk about making mistakes or having done the wrong thing. So even if something's completely not your fault, and it's still not something we broadcast. So I think it gets, so there's people who know this, but they're not sharing it because they feel like they shouldn't be, or they don't want to admit that something went wrong in their business and they had to do it. I think we need to be a lot more open as an IT community and talk about these things so that we can help each other out. Yeah. Because there's stuff here that I knew elements of it, and I've been hearing it from partners, and then there's some stuff that I was just like, I had no idea about this, and it's really, really useful information.
Yeah. I mean, to have a bit of a shameless plug at the end, I suppose, one of the ways we try to help our customers is we do an insurance health check. We basically take all of these elements, pull them all apart and say, if we had to make a claim tomorrow, what do we think? And it is grey because, insurers do take different views, but we take a particular view and we work it through and then say, do we think this would work? Or do you think we'd be having an argument with the underwriter? And that's kind of the quickest way to test it. And we try to do it when it's not renewals. Renewals are just frustrating because you're chasing insurers. But if we do it out of cycle, we can then have a balanced risk discussion about a strategy that we can implement next year as well. So, yeah, that's a little bit about what we do.
So there aren't any questions. Can you do a very quick run through of the coming soon, or?
Absolutely. Okay, so yeah, last thing, just to watch. This is coming down the pipe, right? There's going to be changes to the Privacy Act, and the background to this is, we've got the Privacy Act data breach legislation that came through some years ago, and basically we are so far behind Europe GDPR and the US. It's not funny. So this change, and it'll happen in the next few months, will be significant, and it will impact MSPs. So one of the big things is basically fines, right, for data breaches. Previously, the maximum fine was 2.2 mil, and now it's going to be 50 million or 3 times the benefit gain from the breach, or 30% of the company's revenue, minimum of 12 months. So it's going to be a major change. Also, that the regulator is going to have a lot more teeth to go after companies. So this is kind of it's been quickened because of Optus, Medibank, and Longitude and others. But basically, it's really playing catch up versus the rest of the world.
And that's one of the things the cyber policy actually covers, is fines and penalties in that sense. So, and we take a view that, the smaller end of town potentially will be where they'll make some examples. We'll see some case testing there, because if they go after the medium to bigger guys, they've got the lawyers, they've got the protections, they take longer to litigate. So, the protections around that, that smaller, say, $1 million to $10 million turnover business, a couple of $1,000 policy is a good investment there to have it, and make sure it's got the right framework so it does work when you call on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not all doom and gloom. We
Really?
we try to enjoy what we do, and just sort of holding a mirror up sometimes to our clients' businesses and just say, have you thought about this or have you thought about that? And there's so many successful, amazing MSPs out there that really do keep the lights on for so many businesses. So it's it's great to have those conversations with the market. So we welcome more if anyone wants to talk.
Thank you very much. I will make sure that your contact details are sent out along with the slides to everybody who attended. We'll get in touch with everybody so you've got all the content. And obviously the recording will go up on YouTube so you can rewatch multiple times if you want to.
Maria, thank you so much for organising today. It's been awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Maria.
Absolutely. I've learned heaps. You both mentioned Anne a couple of times. We are in talks. We're going to organise something, try to get legal and insurance in the room at the same time. So last month, Anne presented on having the right legal contracts for your MSP. We thought that, there is an overlap and there's a bit of a grey area of where things fall. So we're going to try and get everyone in the same room and see if we can answer some questions on who we call when things go wrong. Okay, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
Great, thanks, Maria. Thanks, Tim.
Guys.
Thanks, guys.
See you guys. Bye.